Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fensky. Drug addiction can be a big problem in the LGBTQ community. Adults who identify as gay, lesbian, or transgender are more than twice as likely as their heterosexual counterparts to report using an illicit drug within the past year. They're more than twice as likely to report misusing prescription drugs, to using methamphetamine, and to using cocaine. That's according to the 2015 National Survey on Drug Use and Health. And so for locals in recovery, dating apps aimed at the LGBTQ community can be a minefield. On sites like Grindr and Scruff, people aren't just offering companionship. In many cases, they're also offering drugs. So joining us today to talk about the challenges this can present is Jeff Small. He's a former KSDK reporter who found himself making news in 2018 after he was found with meth in his possession at a traffic stop. He's now a concierge and a product specialist for a local hospital, and he joins us today by phone. So, Jeff Small, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I understand you've been speaking out because you recently celebrated more than a year in recovery. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent, and enjoying this new phase of my life.
Now, I know this old phase. I understand it began with cocaine and it later spiraled into meth. Did dating apps play any role in supplying you with those drugs?
I would say with meth in particular. It was always very, very easy to find if I was just looking for someone to use it with, if I was trying to buy it, or in the rare cases I had something extra if I wanted to get rid of it and sell it. It was always extremely easy.
And when you say people are on there selling, I mean, are these big-time dealers, or these are just somebody with a little extra that they're looking to hang out with somebody and do it together?
No, in my experience, it was usually the person who was just trying to make some extra cash and probably just enough to cover their own habits, so they didn't have to pay for their own usage, so they could just kind of cover what they used, make a little extra and kind of keep going back and, without having to go in their own pocket, so to speak, to cover their own habit. And in many cases, you could hang out with somebody and leave with a little bit extra, just kind of a little to-go bag. It's kind of what I frequently got, and so it was what kept me coming back.
Our other two guests today also have a good perspective on this issue. We're joined by Brandon Reed. He's a housing intake coordinator for the nonprofit Criminal Justice Ministry. He's also a board member of Pride St. Louis. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we're joined by Jason Ecker. He's a licensed clinical social worker, and he estimates that nearly 50% of his clients are members of the LGBTQ community. So, Jason, welcome.
Thank you.
Brandon, in your experience, I'm wondering what kind of role these dating apps play in helping people find drugs.
I mean, I think they've definitely made it easier. I think that, back in the day there wasn't dating apps, so now that everybody kind of has an iPhone or some type of smartphone, it just makes accessibility just a little bit easier, a lot easier, actually.
And for you got clean in 2013.
I did.
What's your sense of how things have changed since your life changed in such a big way?
I think things have just gotten worse. I know that, I'm still on the apps, so, for full disclosure, I think that it's just more evident. I think there's not as much as people trying to hide it as it was when I was using actively. People
were being real sneaky back in the day?
I mean, it felt like more of an underground kind of thing.
And now it's not?
I mean, you can't not be. It's on an app. Everybody can kind of see it. So the accessibility and visibility is just increased.
And when you say everyone can see it, what are some sort of clues that people are giving?
Yeah.
I'm sure they're not coming right out and saying drugs for sale.
Sure. So one of the big things, one of the names for meth is Tina in the gay community. So one of the things people do is they capitalize their T's in kind of their profile. So that's something that's usually pretty visible. I think that, and then you can also tell by people's pictures. I think there's certain picture characteristics that definitely define someone who's actively using methamphetamines.
Jeff, is this something that you noticed there, that the pictures were kind of a dead giveaway?
Yeah, as Brandon is talking, I'm literally thinking of, profiles that I've seen or, some things that I've even looked for when I'm online, like the Tina or ICE, a symbol of ICE. That's another word that's used. So anybody with a symbol for ICE, or it might say ICE, the number 4, sale. I mean, some actually surprisingly are very, very bold. And even when I was using, I'm like, my goodness, they're not hiding very much at all. Or there's, if it's cocaine, you might see a ski symbol if somebody's going skiing. And yeah, I mean, just some of the blatant, terminology or just the pictures would actually just kind of make a person cringe, but for the person who's looking for that, again, that's quick and easy. You could be from the comfort of your own home and find exactly what you're looking for and the ability to get it in a matter of minutes.
Jason, I'm wondering what kind of impact that has on clients who are in recovery, people who want to stop using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think when I'm working with somebody who wants to either enter into recovery or remain in recovery, we talk a lot about triggers. And so, there's some things that you can control and change and other things that you can't. So if you used to go to a specific neighborhood to purchase drugs, you can avoid going to that neighborhood perhaps unless, your parents happen to live down the street. And so you go there regularly and you can't avoid the trigger. So I think what happens on the apps is, people feel as if nowadays it's the only way to meet people to date, or they don't want to go to the bars because of what's going on in the bars. So they think that the apps are a way to find community. And then in looking through the pictures on the app and the profiles on the app, they will come across people advertising drugs for sale. So I would refer to that as a trigger.
So how do you deal with that? I mean, it doesn't help to be super lonely when you're struggling with recovery. What would you tell a client?
Well, one of the things that we talk about with addiction and recovery is that, it really, at the end of the day, it comes down to you. And you can't, foolproof your world so that you never come across anything. I mean, if you think about people trying to recover from alcohol use, it's everywhere in our society. I mean, you'd have to, walk around with your eyes closed to not see some advertisement or, being in a restaurant where you're seeing it used. It's different with harder drugs, although alcohol is a pretty hard drug.
It's for sure.
And people advertise drinking all the time on the apps, and I don't think we talk as much about that being a problem, but I find that to be just as symptomatic sometimes as some of the harder drugs. But it comes down to you. And so if you're going to, I let my clients know that if you're going to venture onto the apps, you need to understand that you're going to come across this and have a plan for how to deal with it, just like you would need to have a plan to deal with anything else. What I think is so alluring, I'll just add about the apps, is that, people are advertising experiences. So the problem with, stimulants in the gay community is the experience that people have using stimulants and having sex. And so when you see a person saying that they're using the drug and inviting you to come over, it's not just the drug addiction that's coming up for you. It's the entire experience and that recall of having had those experiences in the past. And that's really powerful, drawing people into.
And we want to hear from you if you're listening. Are you in recovery, and have you struggled with being around certain people, certain social circles, maybe certain apps? How do you deal with that? Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Or you can send us a tweet at STL on air or email us at talk@stlpublicradio.org. Brandon, as you've said, you're in recovery, you're on these apps. Do you have that kind of game plan in the back of your head like Jason advises his clients to do?
I mean, absolutely. You have to be very, very cognizant of, you're going on there for a specific purpose. I think that, he's absolutely right about triggers. There's definitely key instances where you meet somebody and, potentially you're very, very attracted to this person and you may find out that they're actively partying. You have to be prepared and you have to have set up some type of plan to kind of get away from that. I know for me, it's not as big of an issue anymore. I'm really picky about who I interact with on that type of stuff because, the last thing I want to do is jeopardize my recovery.
You're avoiding the skiing emojis.
Skiing, ice cream, capital T's, all of it. All of it.
Plants. I feel like marijuana is being represented here, too. There's a lot of plant emojis that identify marijuana for sale.
Yeah. Jeff, as somebody who's also in recovery, I'm wondering how you deal with this.
Yeah. So I actually spent a considerable amount of time when I was, in the early stages of my recovery going through every means that I had to either get drugs or somebody to find me. And I literally, when I would get on social media, I would, as soon as I saw an emoji or anything that looked like it was about drug activity, I'd block. Or, I would literally go through the entire profile, block. And even people that maybe I had favorited in the past, I would, block them. But I did the same thing through Facebook. I did literally everywhere, including my phone. I mean, and mind you, that it's not foolproof, but it definitely is a big layer of protection there that can't help me avoid those things. But I mean, so I would even go seeking that out just for that reason. And certain people would slip through the cracks because what would start as an ordinary conversation would, hey, by the way, do you party? And that's what I would typically I just block right there. Right then, that conversation would be done. Or sometimes I would say no, then block. I mean, but I don't entertain even the thought of it anymore because I'm not perfect, and I'm certainly not that strong yet that I think I can just be in a situation of anything and be comfortable enough to say, oh no, I'm good. I'm not that strong, and I'm okay saying that.
I saw Jason doing a lot of nodding while you were walking through some of this blocking. Jason, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really proactive way, to get ahead of it. I mean, that's, again, what we would suggest any client do with looking at their phone through people that they used to use with, bought with. The same thing applies to social media, and that, can definitely reduce the exposure that one has. However, even getting into experiences, and then maybe you have some interaction with somebody and you've shared pictures and commentary, and then they come out and identify that they're doing drugs. And I think that's where you really need to have a support system in place that you could reach out to if needed, because like I said, I think that's where the real tug comes.
Hearing how pervasive this is, though, I really feel for you guys. I mean, that seems like it would be tough. And for those of us who struggle with self-control, I don't even know what I'd do in that situation. Brandon, do you think that the companies running these apps need to do a better job of weeding out these kind of solicitations?
I'm not all for censorship. I don't think that's their job. I think as individuals, it's our responsibility to present ourselves how we want to be presented, right? And I don't necessarily place stigma on people who use drugs. Like, if they have every right to do it, if they want to do it, they can. I have to just protect myself because I know that's, using methamphetamine specifically with that drug, it's a whole different ball game than using, and I've used every substance in the book. I mean, that for me was a big eye opener just because I was just not aware of how dark it could get. And I wasn't even aware of how many gay men used it, even in this town. I mean, once I really, really kind of dove into this world, I was just shocked. I mean, there's people who you never saw during the daytime. I mean, they would, it was to me, it was just a very dark experience.
Jason, why do you think that is, that there is this correlation between people who are in this community and maybe more drug use than their heterosexual counterparts?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, I did a lot of research on that in my studies, and back then the statistic was 3 times the rate of addiction as the general population, so I'm happy to hear that it's gone down since I did that work. It comes down to dealing with stigma and dealing with part of being a marginalized community, right? So we start to see that anyone in a marginalized community starts to accumulate shame or the sense of there's something wrong with me, and that's probably one of our worst feelings as humans. And so when I have that feeling, I look for something to help me not have it, to cope with it. And self-medication through drugs and alcohol is a pretty innocent start to addiction. I mean, we all have had the experience of having had a first drink, seeing, with family, et cetera. And so to the person that's struggling with shame and they have that drink or that, a toke of a joint, and suddenly they're like, oh, I feel better. I didn't know I could feel better. And the brain's like, we should do more of that. Mm-hmm. So that's how it starts. It's not like anyone sets out to ruin their life, to deal with the problem. So it's, it's a progressive disease.
Jeff, do you think shame played any role for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the more I did it and saw things crumble around me in my life, I felt bad about it. And so I think many of the people that I was getting high with, they also had their own similar dysfunction and devastation in their lives. So that was a draw for us. We could each sit around and talk about what else we've lost. And, oh, yeah, well, you're not going to work? Well, me either, 'cause I don't have a job, actually. So, hey, good, well, let's just get high then. And it was just this crazy, almost a sick life that kind of kept me in that mode because I didn't really feel very worthy. I didn't feel, I kind of felt ugly and inside and out. And the people I was around were the same, so we were good. Nobody could judge us because we were all in the same boat.
And now that you're in recovery, how has your feelings of self changed?
I absolutely have done a night and day of the person I used to be because I had gotten to the point where I literally didn't, with the exception of places that I had to go, I didn't want to be anywhere. I just kind of wanted to stay in my own little shell. But now, I mean, I'm out. I'm proud of the life that I've made now. And even, again, just doing something like this, talking about it. I mean, I think that's a huge, huge part, not just for me, but for those in recovery to actually talk about, in particular, meth. I mean, and just how how bad it can get and how much damage you can do to your life, but talking about how we can also rebound from this. And so it's given me a new passion, it's given me a voice, and I think I'm speaking for many people who are still locked in that shame and they don't feel comfortable in saying, yeah, I've got a problem, and this problem is really, really bad. And it's, I don't know who to talk about. And so, yeah, I'm in a position where I feel good. I feel healthy. I think I look healthy, and I'm happy.
I'm so happy to hear that. We're talking to Jeff Small, a former KSDK reporter, and Brandon Reed, who is a board member at Pride St. Louis and also works as a housing intake coordinator, and licensed clinical social worker Jason Ecker. I want to go to the phone lines in a minute, but Jason, I know there's something you wanted to add to what Jeff was just saying.
Yeah, well, when Jeff was talking, it made me think about another implication of the apps is that, people that ended up, going down that rabbit hole of or ended up addicted to crystal meth, typically were also isolating. And so the apps also provided a way for really isolated, heavily addicted people to connect, which is something that did not exist, before the apps. And so I think that's also part of and we were seeing a resurgence of methamphetamine use in the gay community and the problems. And for a while, HIV helped to control that. And now there's solutions to not catching HIV. So people, are re-engaged in that world. And so, being able to connect with other users has made it easier for people to continue their addiction.
So this next wave of crystal meth you're seeing, it's really taking off in part because of this. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's terrifying. I do want to go to the phone lines. Patty is calling from Dogtown. Patty, hi, you're on St. Louis on the Air.
Hey, let me get off my radio. You don't hear any feedback right now, do you?
It sounds good right now.
Okay, super. Then it's working because technology kind of like, woo. What a huge topic this is. What a great opportunity for all the people you've already had on and myself to share. Addiction is a really huge issue in the gay community. I'm on the advent of 5 years sober.
Congratulations.
And, hey, thanks a lot, because it's not easy. Because even in the absence of the drugs that I use or the alcohol I use, it's still me under all of that. And so the process, the journey is more of a changing me and not so much the drug use. And then everything changes to the better. But in the gay community, there's such a drive for appearances too, and appearances on every level. And do I am I an okay person, and I never thought I was. And there's so much about that drive for drugs and alcohol as being the solution, and until it kind of turned on me. Mm-hmm. So I'm really lucky that I found a process, a program that helped turn all of me around.
And this program that helped you, is there a name for it or a way that others who might want to use it?
It's a 12-step program, and it's just a process and a group of people that put me on a path to self-discovery and changing. I don't want to promote that. I'm not here to promote that, but anything that we do, any right piece of help that we seek out and implement in our lives that helps us become the people we were always meant to be is huge. I had to get off the apps. I honestly had to get off the apps because of the obsessions in my mind. It came out all different ways, in substance abuse, in meeting people, and it was about a year and a half ago. It was December that when I got a new mentor, if you will, the sponsor or whatever you want to call it, and we had a conversation, and he was very helpful, and he said, you'd be better getting off altogether. And my sponsor is straight, all right? So what an education it is for both of us
yes.
to work together, because the solution that puts me on this path to become the right person isn't just universal for gay people. It's universal for anybody to do the next right thing, put yourself in a favorable position, and who knew? I mean, I can't even tell you that I am so not the person.
Well, Patty, I am so I'm so happy to hear that. I mean, it's such a happy ending and that you're doing so well. So I want to thank you for that call. And Jason, I'm wondering, Patty spoke of it as sort of being this universal thing. Do you think that's true? Or do you think there are some specific different steps that LGBTQ members need to go through to get to that point that Patty's obviously doing so well?
Well, I think recovery there are some universal tenets that work for a lot of people. And then what I also would recommend is that people figure out their individualized program or what works for them. And so, you need to take the program that has been tested and implemented over years and then look at your own problem and your own experiences and then tailor it to address the things that you think are going to be problems for you. So we used to, we'd have clients. I worked in a treatment center. We had people fill out a relapse prevention plan. So it was like, well, what do you think are your triggers, and what are you going to do in the face of those? So that's how I think you bring the solution, to the individual that also is, in a book somewhere.
I'm going to go back to the phone lines. Eddie is calling from Webster Groves. Eddie, hi, you're on St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in recovery from sexual compulsivity, and I have friends who, they put the meth pipe down, they got off the meth, but then, they were going into those sexual situations, hooking up with people who had drugs, and when it came to sex, they were powerless. They were, and once they kind of crossed that threshold of compulsivity, it was Katie bar the door, and so they'd relapse on the meth, and so then they had to address the sex addiction, and by the time we realize we have these problems, a lot of times we don't have a lot of resources. And I know for me, I have friends in Sex Addicts Anonymous and Sexual Compulsives Anonymous that I can call 24/7 every day. I go to meetings, every week. And, even if I don't have good insurance coverage, for therapy or treatment, I still have this community. And it really has been a lifesaver for me. And, you can't see my face, and I'm not giving my last name, so I'm
Sure.
anonymous. So I can tell you, that those are the organizations that have been so helpful for me. And it can be real frustrating to line up those support resources when you're at a bottom, when you're really desperate and you don't have anything. Mm-hmm. So the meetings have been really a lifesaver.
Eddie, thank you so much for that. And again, it's great to hear that you're doing so well too. Brandon, I saw you nodding when he was talking about how some of these addictions can go hand in hand or play off each other. Is that something that you've witnessed or experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just kind of understand why methamphetamine is the way it is. It just provides a heightened experience already, like, especially in a sexual situation. It provides just even more increased pleasure. So I think, and I've heard it from most of my friends, including myself, I think it's just very, very, very challenging to kind of get used to having those heightened experiences, and then all of a sudden kind of have to resort back to just having kind of go back to normal, and that becomes very challenging because they become very, very intertwined. I was just having a conversation with somebody the other night. They're really, really struggling with how do they enjoy sex now that they're not high on speed, and I don't have that answer. And, I think it just takes time. I think Jason might be able to kind of give a little more insight on that. But, that's probably the bigger problem, I think, than I see when people just using meth. It's the sexual component.
Yeah, absolutely. So every time we have an experience where we've altered our mood, we change, we literally raise or lower the bar in our brain as to what we find exciting. Exciting is we've exceeded the bar, okay is we've met, we're at the bar. And so people that use drugs or alcohol chronically, the bar is continually shifting and increasing. So it takes more alcohol to feel drunk and happy, and it takes more meth to feel excited. And so, they're progressive for that reason. And so when we stop using, that's why people, the first week, the first month after they stop using, they feel awful. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the physical withdrawal of the chemical, it's also that the brain is like, well, this sucks, and so, but over time, the bar will lower. And so it's really about being patient through that. So, you reset the pleasure bar in your brain.
And Jeff, can you attest to that? Does that pleasure bar get reset?
Yeah, I think it does, but absolutely. I would concur that, yeah, I mean, it was a challenge for me to get, from sex to just even being around people in general and not being high and just having to readjust. And if you're hanging out with people, not assuming that they just want something that you have, or that people genuinely are interested in what you have to say, or you can enjoy a normal conversation with people. I mean, it was quite an adjustment for me, but it does change. I know at least it did for me, but it by all means was very, very difficult.
Well, I want to thank all of our guests for being here today. It sounds like this is a really difficult journey, but from talking to so many people today who've been able to make that, I hope it provides hope for anybody who's listening out there. So, Jeff Small, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, guys.
And Brandon Reed, thank you for being here. And Jason Eckert, thank you for sharing your expertise in this subject.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
St. Louis Public Radio's The Gateway gives you the day's news first thing every weekday morning. From the ever-evolving relationship between St. Louis City and County to developments in the Missouri and Illinois state capitals and reports from our correspondents in Rolla and the Metro East. We put it all in a roughly 10-minute package with clarity and context. Download The Gateway wherever you get podcasts.